Okay, so let's get started with this third session on effective teaching techniques course module. And today we will be talking about active learning and teaching, in particular lecturing. We'll focus a fair amount of time on how do we lecture using active learning techniques, because lecturing is something we spend a lot of time on. So this is our main topic today, teaching and active learning. So we're focusing on teaching. Just a quick recap, we've already established in the first session, the goal of teaching is learning by students. We've established what learning is, and it's a change in knowledge, which could be declarative or procedural. And we know that learning is a constructive process that the student does from what the student does of thing. And we have understanding of how students learn the declarative knowledge and how they learn the procedural knowledge. So we have all that context already there. So last time we talked about if you have to teach a course, then for a course we discussed how do you establish learning outcomes. Those are statements about the student knowledge at the end of the course. That is, what is the knowledge that results as due to the instruction that you've given at the end of the course, what does the student know? Okay. So with learning outcomes, now we can actually identify the topics to be covered in the course. So the syllabus, so to say, can now be determined, and essentially we have to ensure that all the topics that contribute to learning of those outcomes are included, and more importantly, only those are included. Because we've established the learning outcome, that's our goal. The ordering of those topics, etc., is an exercise that us guys do as faculty, and that's a creative exercise. We go over it a couple of times before we hit the right syllabus. But with learning outcomes established, we sort of know what to, we have some direction about what to include, what not to include. Okay, so this all of us do, and we'll leave it to you to do it, the list of topics that you need to cover. But then the question comes, once you have the syllabus sort of list of topics ready, then we have to teach the course. And there's two main aspects of teaching. One is, of course, giving lectures. And we give learning activities inside the lecture and outside the lecture. Okay, so in this session, we will discuss lecturing, as it is a very important teaching activity. We know that. And we'll also briefly discuss other learning activities that can be planned in a course. Okay, we've already seen that that integrated or proper course design is after you've established the learning outcomes, then what other learning activities, teaching learning activities you do, and of course, what is the assessment? Assessment we'll talk about in the next session. So here the focus is on teaching, because this is where we spend most of our time. We prepare lectures, assignments, the examples, case studies. We all kinds of things we think of, and we spend a lot of time in not just preparing this, but also delivering it. So and keeping in mind that student only learns by what a student does or think, we need to create situations such that the student is forced to think and forced to do something, right? So giving lectures just to provide information to students is limited in what learning it delivers. And in fact, more so today with all the knowledge, all the information being available on the net, right? So lectures as a source of information is a very old concept, is not a sound thing for learning. So what are the activities that promote learning? The first is, of course, lecturing, but with active elements. We'll discuss this. We'll spend a fair amount of time today discussing this. It's more effective than when made, lectures are far more effective when you make them active learning experiences by short in-class interjections. So we'll discuss this today. Fair amount of time we'll spend. But there are other activities in your course planning that you can include which promote learning. Of course, doing experiences. So the solving problems, you can show them in class, in tutorial, outside class. You can also have students solve problems outside class. And of course, doing labs and experiments outside the lecture, that promotes doing, so students learn. Doing projects where they apply a lot of concepts that have been taught, designing, building. Again, those are doing experiences that you can create for the student. Observing experiences. Okay. Instructors solving a problem. So in the lecture, for example, you show how to solve a problem, the student observes, and then the student can apply it on assignments that you give. Showing a simulation on how something works in lecture, tutorial, or giving a link for the student to view the video. You can observe a plant machinery in operation. So that's lab visit, it's company visit, etc. So those are all, they all promote learning. And there is, of course, reflection, which is thinking and meaning making. So you can have reflection student activities. For example, you can ask the students to summarize something, explain something in the class, in a presentation, in a report, whichever way. But the activity of summarizing and explaining triggers the reflection and thinking in the student. And remember, thinking and doing are the two things that we have to do. We have to encourage students to do. Explain how it is connected to other prior knowledge. So by showing that connection, you are triggering reflection in students to understand what connections are there. How is it related to the current context, the student's context, in the local context, in the student life, in the surrounding life around the student. So all those connections help trigger reflection, thinking, meaning making. What does this knowledge mean? All these get triggered. So these are the types of activities you can do to promote learning. So what do you do once? So there is a range of types of activities you can do. So then when you're planning your course, what do? You first, of course, important concepts for the course, then you arrange them week-wise. We know that these are the topics and you arrange them in order so the student learns the basics first and then can apply them, etc. Okay, so we have to identify that. I've already mentioned that. Then you identify the nature of in-class activities that you can do. Okay, of course, lectures with some activities, I'll talk about that. You can do in-class problem solving, case studies. So what do you do in the class, in your lecture, which will promote learning? So you've got to plan that out. And of course, all of us plan it. And you have to identify out-of-class learning activities for students, assignments, lab problems. So they actually, they learn whatever are the learning goals. So this out-of-class learning activities is most important for learning, as these are necessarily done by students. Just asking the students go and do this is not sufficient. You must provide, you must evaluate what the student does, and you must provide prompt feedback. In a course, typically a student will spend 3 hours a week in the lectures, and probably spend 5-6 hours, twice as much, outside the lecture doing various things. So a lot of learning happens outside, and so it's very important that out-of-class learning activities for students must be thought of carefully, and with assessment and feedback over there. The overall goal, of course, is to create rich learning experience for students. Okay, so I've given you some examples from different types of courses. So for example, if there is a topic, conditional statements in programming language, and if you're covering that in a lecture, so in class, I have it here that what will I do? I'll give lecture with some programming demo. So that's my in-class approach. Okay, activities that I'll do, we'll talk about it. That holds making lecture active learning, that holds for everything. Okay. Outside the class, I will ask students to write 2 programs using conditionals and nested conditionals. Right? So these are the activities we'll do for learning of this particular concept. Okay, Tragedy of the Commons. It's a very famous essay by Garrett Harding, I think 1960s or so. And we used to have that as a reading assignment in our institute. So one approach could be, because it's a short essay, one approach could be that in the class, we will use flipped classroom. And I'll talk about it briefly today itself. Okay, so the reading material is given earlier, but in the class, you have a discussion followed by some problem solving applying the concept. And of course, outside the class, you have to give the students have to read the essay. So that's one work the student has to do. Then you have to ask, you may want to, or in this case, I'm suggesting that ask the student to write a small note on a contemporary issue where Tragedy of Commons plays out. Okay, so I'm just giving different types of strategies you can use in class and outside the class. So memory hierarchy, if you're teaching computer organization, and then in class would be lecture, giving, and then examples of memory structure in today's PC, how is it organized, and maybe some photos and some videos as to what is the memory chip look like, what does it, how is it connected, some such videos perhaps, right? That those would be in class. And then outside the class, you give some assignment to solve a memory hierarchy problem, for example, impact of levels and size. If the sizes of different memories are changed, how does it impact? Right. So these are, I'm just giving examples of how you can plan your teaching and learning activities, both for once you have identified the topics, what do you do in class and what do you do outside the class, or what do you have students do outside the class? So the main point is that you plan your lectures and what types of learning activities you will do in lectures to make lectures effective. All right. But you must also plan outside the lecture learning activities that you will have students do. So then together, it's a whole course inside the class, outside the class, and you are directing it so students can learn properly.